This is Get the Balance Right, a podcast for female entrepreneurs who are totally stressed out over money and managing their busy lives. I'm your host, Heather Zeitzwolf, profit advisor and money coach. I help my clients run more profitable businesses. I take the mystery and confusion out of their numbers so they can reach their financial goals. Join us for a holistic approach that supports a healthy lifestyle while obtaining financial freedom. Stop freaking out. It's time to get the balance right. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. Did you know that the fastest growing segment of people starting businesses are middle-aged women? And many of them are utilizing writing books as a way to quickly gain influence and visibility. This is the topic for episode 56 of the podcast. I am your host, Heather Zeitzwolf, and this is Get the Balance Right. We have an exciting guest who I met on Clubhouse. Stephanie Mojica is an author, editor, and coach whose business, Get Their Attention Now, is helping entrepreneurs all over the globe write, publish, and promote their books. One of the quickest ways an entrepreneur can gain authority and be viewed as a thought leader is through the publication of a book. It gives you instant street cred. If you're a woman who started her entrepreneurial quest middle-aged, then you know it comes with a host of challenges. One of the biggest is cutting through the noise to get noticed. But as you'll discover on this episode, writing a book can help you stand out from the pack. As the world changes, so will the statistics. One of the most exciting changes over the last several years is that the largest percentage of those starting businesses are women of color. In general, more women are deciding to stay active in their careers later in life. But despite all of their years of experience, they are finding it challenging to get hired. As a result, more and more women 50 plus are taking on entrepreneurship for the very first time. We are living in exciting times where women are finally getting the accolades they deserve in business. As a child of the 70s, I saw how women had to fight to be heard. Through movements such as Me Too, women are finally getting justifiable respect. I really wonder if I had that societal support when I was younger, if I would have started a business sooner. My entrepreneurial journey started in my 50s, although I dreamt about being a business owner my whole life. When I was a kid, I was super into theater and had these grand ideas of running a drama summer camp. In my early 20s, I fantasized about being an art dealer and running my own gallery with a stable of edgy, temperamental artists. Then I longed to be a nightclub mogul and put on fabulous events where club kids would promote shows and glamorous people would stand in line behind a velvet rope, just hoping to be let in. I had an array of other ideas that ranged from owning a video store filled with cult movies to being a vegan cooking coach. It wasn't a lack of passion or ideas that stopped me. Then why did it take me so freaking long to take the plunge into being an entrepreneur? Fear. Straight up, it was fear. That fear stemmed from the fear of failure, fear of losing money, fear of judgment, fear of commitment, fear. And I wonder if I was a man, if it would have been different. So what changed in my 50s? I certainly still have fear, but age does something. Once you have years of experience and have suffered through failure and survived, the fear of starting something new isn't as scary. You may feel differently, and I know some folks were more daring in their youth and took risks that they wouldn't dream of doing in their 50s. I get that. But just like wine, people can get better with age. Not only do they have a wealth of experience and knowledge, they tend to have a better understanding of themselves. When a woman is in her 50s, it's more difficult to find employment. During the pandemic, women in this age group who lost their jobs statistically were having a more difficult time finding a new job than their younger counterparts. Because of this, they faced the dilemma of longer unemployment or early retirement. Therefore, the other viable option was starting their own business. This issue of ageism is not bound by gender. However, women are far more affected by this negativity than men. Times may be changing, but unfortunately, older women are often the victim of ageism and sexism. But worse, senior women are traditionally more vulnerable and have a need for dependence. As such, they are more apt to suffer from abuse and violence. The women's suffrage movement happened over a century ago, and although the women's rights movement of the 70s was strong, obtaining true equal rights is still a battle. As women, our voice matters, and we must be heard. Writing a book can be a powerful way for us to get our messages out there. As a female entrepreneur, I encourage you to at least consider writing a book. Have you ever thought about writing a self-published book based on your speeches, blogs, or presentations? Or perhaps you've always had a secret burning desire to see your name in print. Or are you thinking, give me a break, Heather. Me? I can't write a book. No matter which stage in the writing process you are in, from running scared to writing your book description for Amazon, this episode is full of golden nuggets. Our guest, Stephanie Mojica, has years of experience and has a global clientele. In fact, she's a digital nomad and travels the planet working virtually where she can get a Wi-Fi connection. That's so cool. Be sure to follow Stephanie on Clubhouse to gain more insight into this topic, where she is very generous with her time and knowledge. All right, my peeps. Here is my conversation with Stephanie Mojica. Stephanie Mojica, welcome to Get the Balance Right podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Heather. It's an honor to be here today.
You are actually a digital nomad, and where are you at right now?
So I'm in Suriname. It's a small country in South America near Brazil and Guyana. That's where I am right now.
Wow, that is very cool. For the people in the audience who don't know you, can you just tell a little bit about yourself and the company that you have?
It's a long story, but basically my company, Get Their Attention Now, I provide book coaching, book editing, and limited copywriting and ghostwriting services for select clients. My main client base is coaches, consultants, attorneys, and other decision makers who really understand the power that can come from writing and self-publishing a book. That's the main thing I'm focusing on right now, really consulting and coaching them step by step through the writing and publishing process. But I also provide book editing and, like I said, ghostwriting and copywriting for select clients.
Where are you normally located at when you're not digitally nomading?
I was born and raised in the United States, grew up in Virginia, have lived a lot of places in the U.S. I would call Los Angeles home. But even before the pandemic, I realized I was able to work with people from anywhere in the world. Like I was living in Kentucky and I had people, actually, they were literally traveling from Florida and Texas to work with me. But, you know, it's really possible to do this kind of work from anywhere.
According to your LinkedIn page, you speak several languages.
English is my native language. I speak pretty much fluent Portuguese and Spanish, although in Spanish, my writing and reading and comprehension are better. I speak pretty decent level of Dutch. I also speak a language called Sranan Tongo. That literally means Surinamese tongue, and it's a Creole language of Suriname. It's a mixture of English, Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, African, and indigenous words.
That's crazy cool. Wow, how did you ever learn that?
Living in Suriname, it's the language of the street, and because it has so many words from English, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, languages I'm familiar with, as well as some African words, having been exposed to Haitian Creole and Boston. And then it has some indigenous words. It's just, believe me, I'm not perfect at it, but it's pretty easy to pick up.
Maybe for you.
But a lot of missionaries used to come to Suriname. That's a whole nother story. But apparently they picked it up really quickly, too. There's a lot of videos on YouTube of people speaking it.
I'm going to have to check that out. The topic today, why business owners should write books and how they can get that done fast and done fabulously. For the people in the audience who are wondering, should I write a book? What are some of the benefits of a business owner writing a book?
Oh, there's a ton of benefits. I think instant credibility, it really cements somebody as an expert. It's a way to teach people, especially if you're a coach, consultant, attorney, other person who has some sort of message. It's really a way to reach people. I've had clients get on various international shows because of the book that I guided them through. It's just really a way to set yourself apart from others in your field, because especially with the pandemic, a lot of people are calling themselves coaches and consultants, and it's really hard to differentiate yourself. And a lot of speakers are benefiting from books too. I worked with a client recently who wrote her book in about 9 weeks, and she said the reason she signed up was she was tired of going to speaking events, looking at everybody else's bio and seeing author of, and she didn't have that. So it's starting to become the trend.
If you're considering writing a book, if you're trying to get speaking gigs, do you recommend taking whatever it is that your talking points are from your speech and developing that into a book? Or where should someone start if they are interested in developing a book for the benefit of promoting their business?
That's an excellent question. I've worked with business owners in a variety of ways, and I'll explain a few ways. The first is especially realtors, attorneys, and some more established coaches. They have years of content, all sorts of blog posts, even YouTube videos can be transcribed. They have all sorts of content. They have spoken. Maybe some of them have taught in classrooms. So there have been people I've worked with that literally pull that content together into a book, so they don't necessarily have to go write a new book. Then the people who want to write a book, there is a systematic way to do it, which I guide people through. One common misconception is that the book has to be like 100,000 words. That's not true. 20 to 30,000 words is at least 100 pages when you print it, and that's still a pretty substantial contribution. And if someone is dedicated, it doesn't take horribly long to write 20,000 words, especially with the right support. Then another way is some people are really good at just speaking their stories, like a client, and I have permission to use her name, Dion, I recently worked with. You can literally dictate your stories, just tell little stories using voice to text, and then have an editor. Like I said, I also edit, clean it up. There's a lot of ways other than the traditional sitting behind a computer all day writing and doing nothing else to get your book out there. And some people I've worked with want to do it the old-fashioned traditional way, and that's totally fine. But I think it's a misconception when people hear about writing a book that it's like going to take up their entire life.
If they're thinking about, okay, now I want to try to write this book, I guess gone are the days where you had to get a publisher because you can print things through Amazon on demand. What is the next path after someone decides, okay, I want to try to write a book? Should they be thinking about how they're going to format this in case how it's going to be printed, or does that come later? What would be the next step?
The next step would be to just start writing. Even if you're not going to use a coach, consultant, just start writing. I really encourage people not to edit themselves as they go. That's like a later phase, because a lot of folks get stuck in second guessing everything they're writing. Then the book never gets done. Writing that shitty first draft, as one of my coaches calls it. Do that, and then you can go through it yourself again, work with an editor, etc. That's the first step, getting that first draft written and then getting it edited. One thing I advise people to do is not to skimp on the editing, proofreading process. People are really cruel on Amazon reviews when there's a lot of typos in the book. Readers are more discriminating. They will tear people apart. There's a lot of keyboard warriors. So you've written the book. You've edited it. The next step is to have it formatted. And I know a graphic designer who does that. So you format the book. You also have a book cover designed. Well, I'm going to assume you're going to go the self-publishing route, because I think for a million reasons that's better, especially for business owners, coaches, consultants, attorneys, etc. Then either you can do this yourself or delegate it. You upload it to Amazon. Amazon has Kindle and print on demand. And then you can also upload to iBooks, etc. A few things should go inside of that book before you publish it. A common mistake a lot of authors, whether they're coaches, business owners, or not, make is they just slap their website in there, hoping somebody's going to go look at it. I really encourage people to put a link to what is called a free gift. It could be something like an audio of you speaking. It could be a short report. And then you get that person's email address and you're building your loyal fan base, because most people aren't going to go look at some website if they like your book. That's something important that folks can do.
As far as the formatting goes, is there some sort of software that you can get for that you recommend, or can you just do it in Word? Is there any particular things that you need to know for being self-published in Amazon?
You used to be able to use Microsoft Word pretty easily on Amazon. They got wise to that, and I think they were getting very inundated by people submitting, I'll just be honest, shit. Throwing 5 pages together about their dog and then just throwing it on Amazon. KDP, which is Kindle Digital Publishing, has become really picky. I do not know a software. I know that the designers I've worked with, they use InDesign, and they can do specific things to make it Amazon approved for both print and Kindle. But unfortunately, I don't know of a software program that's going to work for what Amazon is now. Like 5 years ago, I used to just format it in Word for folks, make it look nice. Then they would just have to hire a cover designer, which you can get a cover for pretty cheap, a nice one too. But Amazon has changed that.
You can probably find someone to do that in InDesign. I would imagine you could probably outsource that. So that's probably not something that should be a hurdle that stands in anyone's way.
No, like I said, I have some designers I work with. If you're on a really low budget, you can find somebody on Fiverr. If you have a virtual assistant, he or she might be able to do it. I wouldn't make these things a hurdle. They're really easy to outsource.
So here's an individual, they're a business owner, they write this book. Now they've got it uploaded to Amazon for being self-published. What is the next step? How do they get people to actually read the book, buy the book, engage with the book? Is this just something that's put out there that is another offer for them just to generate more leads? What is some of the reasoning behind having this book, and what can it do for you?
So that's excellent questions. A common mistake people make is they just put the book on Amazon and never talk about it again. That's the biggest mistake any author, I don't care if you're a business owner or not, can make. My clients, I encourage them to talk about their book on all their social media throughout their marketing process as they're writing it, to get that pent up demand for that book. There's a lot of marketing things you can do. You can have a virtual book tour. One of my coaches, a woman named Kathleen Gage, talks about virtual book tours. You can go on podcasts and talk about your book. You can have a press release written and send it to your local media. I did that for one of my clients, and even though this is not my market, it was a big accomplishment for him. He got on the 700 Club. Personally, no offense anyone out there, I would never watch it, but for him, that was a dream come true. That was a big freaking deal in his niche. You have to put your foot on the pavement a little bit. And again, this is stuff you can easily outsource. It's just like any kind of marketing for your business. You're going to have to mention it. You're going to have to send out press releases, try to get on podcasts. I will say that for the clients I've worked with, once they have that book, it's a lot easier to get on podcasts. It's a lot easier for the newspapers to want to interview you. And once you do one interview, and Heather, you probably know how this is, once you get on one podcast or know a couple of podcasters, then it snowballs from there. Let's say if you got on your local NBC affiliate. Once you're on that, then the local newspapers, if they haven't contacted you already, are going to contact you. CBS and ABC and Fox are going to want to get in touch. Nobody wants their competition to be the only one that has the story. It just kind of snowballs, and you or your assistant can take a few simple steps.
As far as the formatting goes, Audible versus a written book, is there any benefit from one to the other? Should you bother doing the Audible book, or is it more of having this tangible item that you can go around and sell?
So I'll be honest, I don't have any expertise or experience with Audible other than as a consumer. I will say that for one of my clients, he was able to get printed copies of his book. When you do Amazon print on demand and you're the creator, you can order physical copies at cost for a few dollars a copy. So he was carrying around, obviously this is before COVID, a box of books when he was going out doing his various volunteer work in ministries and was literally selling them. Some business owners aren't going to want to do that, but once COVID passes and people are going to live networking events again, I would recommend carrying some books around with you.
So you could actually buy your books at cost from Amazon and then sell them in person. You can increase the price to what it should be sold at when you're live with somebody. Maybe if you're doing a speech somewhere, like a keynote or something, then you could sell the book there, I suppose.
Yes, like my client's book launch party, this is before COVID again. I think he had about 200 people in the room and he had a couple hundred books. And I think he sold almost all of them. That was like a few grand of profit right away. He was signing them, having selfies with people. It was great. I have a client that I'm working with right now, and she lives in New York City and is literally talking to the community bookstores about, obviously they're going to share the profits, but just about putting those in the store. So there's a lot of things you as the creator and copyright holder can do.
What about the business owners that feel like, I don't really have a blog, writing is not my thing? Would you recommend a ghostwriter for them?
Yes, you can have a book ghostwritten. I'll be honest though, it is quite the investment. I think people don't understand how much work goes into writing somebody else's book. I have read that some ghostwriters charge anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000. I'm closer to the $25,000 range, and that's still too much for a lot of people. But if you're already successful, say you're in the six figures, but you want to be higher and you just don't have the time, I think it's a great investment because that person will interview you. For example, I have 17 years of newspaper journalism experience. I've interviewed everybody from Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama to the man on the street at the carnival in Southern Indiana. I can talk to almost anybody. I think ghostwriting for the right business owner, attorney, coach, or expert is a great investment. Again, I think people also think they're going to make a lot of money on book sales. Yes, you can get some decent book sales, but most of your money is going to come from the opportunities. The speaking engagements, like this client I talked about, Andrew, he's been getting speaking engagements where people are paying him to speak. Or if you're one of those coaches, experts that sells from the state, or if somebody wants to coach, consult with you because it's something they read in your book or heard on a podcast, that's where the opportunities really start to come in. So I think that's another common misconception that somebody's going to publish a book and sell 1 million copies. You can. And it does happen, but most of it's going to be from the opportunities that come your way.
That's great to keep in mind. Now, what about for a ghostwriter? Once you have it published, do you have to give the ghostwriter royalties, or is that something that's in the contract? Who gets the royalties for something like that?
That's spelled out in the contract. I do work for hire. I don't ask for royalties. I don't ask for a credit. That's negotiable. Some people want like an editor credit, but really, I do work for hire. It's your book. If you go make $1 million off it, that's your business. Maybe I'm too nice, but I also want to be fair.
This is something that just has to be very clear in the contract so that if it does become some sort of bestseller, that would be great, but you want to make sure that you're not going to get sued later on, I would imagine.
Exactly, and that's why I have attorney written contracts, and often somebody who wants a ghostwriter has their own attorney, even at the lower end, because the investment involved, they usually have an attorney. They may be an attorney themselves. That's usually quite the undertaking, and that's why I don't really market ghostwriting services, because for most people, they don't want to pay that. I would just caution people, if they were looking for a ghostwriter, please don't go for some cheap person. A lot of people that charge the rock bottom rates, like 1 cent a word to write a book, that quality, it's probably going to be outsourced where someone's not a native English speaker. Please don't think I'm saying anything discriminatory, but you're just not going to get the quality. You don't know who this person is. If they're charging 1 cent a word, it just really calls into question their expertise. It's definitely not something to go comparison shopping for.
How does somebody find a good editor? Do they interview people? Is there a website where people advertise editing? And how do you know if you've gotten a good editor? Should you try them out? Do you have to look at samples? How do you pinpoint who's going to be a good editor?
That's a great question. Again, just be careful when going and looking on different websites. Upwork can be a good place place to find an editor, but you really need to check that person's reviews. I have tons of references and testimonials for my editing. You really just want to find somebody who has social proof. I think that's the best way. Also, it's a good idea to ask your editor some questions. I like to try to get on the telephone or Zoom with people before taking their editing project. Some people, when they edit, try to make the story their own. That's not the kind of editor you want. You want somebody who's going to look through it for the punctuation, the grammar, the spelling, the typos. So that's like copy editing, proofreading. If you need a content editor, where you want to see is the content sound. Some people call it content editing, developmental editing. I think it's important to read some articles, Upwork has a few, about the different types of editors. And again, if the price is really low, just be careful because some people are running your document through stuff like Grammarly and saying that they edited it. So just really check their references and just be careful.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. I'm glad I asked you that. I know writing is a process that, you really have to force yourself to do because a lot of people just don't want to naturally just sit down and write. Authors like Stephen King has to put aside a certain amount of hours per day. We're not saying anybody out there is going to try to be Stephen King, and certainly we're probably not writing horror fiction. But what are some tips for people to sit down and actually get some writing done? I guess you could do calendar blocking, but do you have any other tips to kind of force you into a pattern of writing?
That's great because actually I talk about that in some detail in my free ebook, 3 Things You Must Know Before Writing Your Book. One of the things I mentioned in my free ebook is you can do what's called Pomodoros, which for those who don't know, those are 25-minute blocks. And then you take a 5-minute break. One of my coaches, Monica Shaw, calls it the flow method. You could literally put in 1 Pomodoro and get a lot done, or you could put in 2. I really just recommend even sitting down for 25 minutes to write or dictate what you want to say, and you'll be surprised how much you can get done. Calendar blocking is important. I think for a lot of coaches, other experts, though, that's a challenge. But I've had some people who get up an hour earlier in the morning and just try to run through 2 Pomodoros before the kids get up, before the day starts. So I think that's another misconception that you need hours and hours on end. And if that works for you, great. I've had clients that works for them and they have the time and the space to do that. But for most people who are probably listening to this podcast, they don't have that sort of time. So 25 minutes can really help out if you don't have existing content.
For someone's first book, do you suggest if they don't have a ton of content, is it okay to write something around 150 pages? What would be the minimum amount of pages you would recommend somebody do with their first?
I would say 20,000, 30,000 words. The number of pages is going to depend on what size book you choose for print. If it's going to be, say, 5 by 7 or 6 by 8, 8 by 10, obviously the smaller ones is better. You don't want the print to be too tiny because you want to be accessible to people. I would say 20 to 30,000 words. That's what I'm also hearing from other experts. I know some people that do publishing, the traditional kind where you have to get an agent and all that, and then the self-publishing kind. And people are getting more and more into 20 to 30,000 word books, especially for business. I think that's a good length to start with. And again, some people want more, and that's fine.
I guess it depends on how many words that you have, how you want to format it. I've ordered through Amazon, like, oh yeah, I want to have this book. And then when I get it, it's like a leaflet. I'm like, why did that cost me $17?
I know it's something that needs to be at least 100 pages or people are going to feel very ripped off. And I think that's another reason Kindle started getting stricter about the formatting, because people were putting together these 5, 10, 20-page things, calling it a book. That's like a free report. That's not really a book. It's important to have it about 100 pages, give or take a few pages or more. I've had clients who print a 500-page book, but that's because they're writing like a memoir. And then other people, it's like 100 pages. There's a lot of flexibility, but please don't go publish a leaflet. If you do, please don't call it a book.
I found you from Clubhouse. Are you pretty active on Clubhouse, or where do you hang out most of the time? Where can people find you?
I'm on Clubhouse a lot. Yes, I'm on Clubhouse pretty much every day. A couple hours a day, sometimes more, especially at night and on the weekend. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook quite a bit. especially Instagram, because it's so connected to Clubhouse. So you can find me that way.
Yeah, and we're going to have all the links in the show notes. You mentioned that you have the free download, so we'll have a link for that as well. Was there anything else that you wanted to add, Stephanie, before we close?
I just want to say that, especially with the right systems and support, I think a lot of folks underestimate what they can do when it comes to writing and publishing a book. It's a lot of work, I'm not going to lie to you, but it really pays off, and it's really not as hard as a lot of folks make it out to be. As somebody tries to tell you need to pay $10,000 to write and publish your book, I'm talking about when you're writing it, like you're personally writing it. Please run the other way, because there are scams out there. There was a woman on Clubhouse who was saying somebody was calling themselves a publishing company. I've been a creative writer all my life. I have these two perspectives, but in the creative writing world, we call it vanity presses. Literally, you're paying like 10 grand just to say you wrote a book, and then the books aren't doing anything for people. Depending on what support you need, you can get a really awesome book for less than that, and you have full control over everything. It's your book. 70% as of the time of this recording of the Amazon royalties are yours. It's just, I think, a really good deal for people to write and publish their book and just do it in the simple way I've just outlined today.
Do you have any opinions on the artwork on the cover of the book? Do you think that helps sell the book at all? I know in the regular publishing world, the cover seems like that would have a lot of impact on sales. Do you think it's as important that you get a really great cover art for these types of self-publishing books?
I think so. Yes, I think it's still important, especially if you do print. Some people just do digital, so you can get away with it. But if it's print, really invest in a good cover designer, because otherwise it will look cheap on bookshelves. Just because it's self-published doesn't mean it has to look cheap. It does not mean it has to look or read unprofessional. And I think that's another common misconception, that self-published means bad, cheap, etc. There's a lot of advantages when you do it properly. Like, you're not going to have somebody in some publishing house in New York City rewriting your life's work, which I've worked with people who went that route and they weren't happy.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. This has been very educational, and I've enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. Hope to hear from some folks soon.